Alyssa here, moderating person, but yeah, sure, let's do the old traditional around the horn, introduce yourself, starting with
Yeah, all right. Scott, Steve, I've been calling first. Steve Sokolowski, City of Cannon Beach.
Barb Count, Mayor of Cannon Beach. Elena Cochran, Councilor Gerhart.
Steve Rudd, Mayor of Seaside.
Jeff Ford, Community Development Director, Seaside.
Tiffany Taylor, City Planner, Astoria.
John Roberts, City of Astoria.
Chad Moritz, North Coast Housing Solutions. Robert St. Clair, City of Cannon Beach.
Online, yeah.
Alyssa's first.
Hey everyone, Alyssa Gertler, Clatsop County, coming to you live from Klickitat County, Washington.
Awesome. How about Garrett next?
Hey, I'm Garrett Phillips with Columbia River Estuary Study Task Force.
Awesome. Elizabeth's iPhone.
Elizabeth Adams, City Councilor, Astoria, Ward 3.
Awesome. And then Kate Allen.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am Kate Allen. I am with the Affordable Rental Housing section of Oregon Housing and Community Services, and I manage the technical advisor team. Good to be with you today.
I think Jason Mackey's the last one online.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Jason Mackey and I am on Kate's team. I am a technical advisor with Oregon Housing and Community Services. Thanks for having me.
Okay. So, Alyssa, didn't know if you wanted to provide a formal overview of this, but it sounds like we're going to hear a presentation from Kate and Jason on technical assistance from OHCS.
I do not need to provide a formal overview. I think we've talked about this in previous meetings where we've invited Kate and Jason to be part of the task force in general, and there was interest in learning more about what they're up to and what it might mean for us. So wanted to give them some time to talk further. So Kate and Jason, and by the way, thanks to you guys for helping in the room. I appreciate it. Anyway, Kate and Jason, take it away.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen here. Is everybody able to see the shared presentation?
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. So again, my name's Jason, and I'm going to go through a brief presentation here. I just want to call out that there's several of us on the team. You can kind of see some of our names there, but you'll be hearing from both myself and Kate today. And just a real quick agenda, we're going to talk about a couple different topics, but really we just want to share a little bit about the role of the technical advisors and the technical advisor team, a little about the ORCA process, which is the Oregon Centralized Application, touch on affordable home ownership, and then kind of round out the presentation with a couple of slides about the Moderate Income Revolving Loan Program, which is more commonly referred to as the MERL program. And so at just a really high level, OHCS, Oregon Housing and Community Services, is the state housing finance agency. So the technical advisors are really in place to kind of support the efforts of the agency. But a little bit more specifically, technical advisors are specialized OHCS staff assigned to guide development partners through the ORCA system and beyond. And a little bit in more specificity, really what we're wanting to do is help you, partners, stakeholders, understand the full range of OHCS resources and identify the best funding mix for a specific project. We also provide insights on timing for applications and development milestones. We attempt to guide you through both pre-development activities and ORCA processes to get the project built. Ultimately, our goal is to increase housing production. We connect you with OHCS pre-development loans, capacity building grants, and we also are able to provide consultant referrals. But really, at the heart of what our team does is we're really hoping to cultivate relationships between you and OHCS that can support current projects and the future pipeline of development. So obviously, we're here as a resource to help guide applicants through the ORCA process once an application has been submitted. But really, we want to be a resource or a liaison between you and OHCS to really understand maybe the vision of a project or the early stages of a project, or maybe you have an idea about pursuing something new. We really want to be a resource for all stakeholders, all the way from concept to completion. So that is our goal. And we will be sharing this presentation with everybody on this call afterwards to be used as a resource. There's going to be some links and some other information that will be helpful, but I just want to call out on this slide is we do have kind of a general technical advisors email. So if at any point you have a question or would like to touch base with us, you can use that email address there. And so with that being said, I'd like to pass this next slide over to Kate.
Thanks. Thanks for getting us started, Jason. And again, we really appreciate being in the room with you today. One of the best places for our team, the technical advisors, to be working is with regional coalitions. And we're really seeing that that is kind of across the state. That's kind of where the action is happening these days. This sort of all hands at the table, from electeds to your local developers to the community serving agencies, service providers, being able to create those kind of comprehensive visions for a housing production strategy goes a long way with our agency and helps you support partners to kind of tee up and get in the systems that we're talking about. But then also with our other, state enterprise partners, folks at Business Oregon, some of the work that League of Cities has done to secure resources specifically for regional approaches to meeting affordable housing needs. So we're super excited to be here with you today. As Jason said, divisionally, we kind of have multiple things that OHCS does. We both live in the affordable rental housing section. We refer back and forth and attend meetings a lot with our colleagues in the affordable homeownership section. And then we try to create other tools, which Jason will talk about, the moderate income revolving loan program. There are some other things that came out of the most recent state legislature, which, we could probably come back with updates, in a couple of months, or potentially at the regional summit around some of the programs that are going to emerge out of the legislature, aiming at senior housing and some more tools around infrastructure. So more good stuff to come. But we're going to talk about the ORCA process. I'm going to cover a little bit. So the Oregon Centralized Application Process is specific to affordable rental housing resources. We'll have a slide in a couple of minutes that kind of says what those resources are. But this process is a new process for OHCS, launched in 2024 in direct response to the governor's housing production mandates and really historic levels of legislative investment that had been made and directed to OHCS over the last few years. Folks who have worked in the system may be familiar with the old NOFA system, a notice of funding availability, which would generally be to a very specific kind of funding. And most rental housing development funding, or most rental housing development projects, require a whole stack of funds. So this would sometimes have developers, over several successive years applying for all of the types of resources that they needed to put a project together. this new and improved process really creates a pipeline in two ways. First, for developers and those sponsors of housing to get a project on the radar screen of agency as early as possible. We refer to that as the intake step. That can be anything from a project that is literally ready to blaze forward to a concept twinkle in the eye. That's one part of the pipeline we're establishing. The other really is the pipeline through which all the affordable housing resources for rental housing flow. So when we get new legislative resources, we no longer have to build a whole program around it and then, issue NOFA. This is to really kind of streamline that process. So if we had all the dollars in the world, projects would come in and we would meet them with dollars and things would close right through there. What we know is we work always in a resource reality that does not meet the need and does not necessarily even meet the capacity that we have out there. But this tool, this intake, was incredibly helpful during the legislative session in that for the first time, we were able to go as an agency and then other advocates and folks, our jurisdictional partners, were able to go to their legislature and say, look, there are 7 projects that, but for funding, could be funded through this process because developers had turned in that intake. So our big message around that kind of open door of the ORCA process is, as developers are thinking about a new project, get it in, get it on the radar screen. When a project is ready to go into the next step, that is literally a review of the impact of the project. This is demonstrating the need for the project based on community priorities, based on the aspects of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis that reflect the local needs. So Clatsop County needs, or Astoria or Warrenton needs. The developer has the opportunity to tie the project they're proposing to what are the locally identified needs. That step collects a lot of the initial information about the project that is then reviewed, and then at that stage, that project concept goes to our decision body, the Housing Stability Council, and the Housing Stability Council then reviews those, and their interest is impact. They are less worried about the financial, the nuts and bolts of it as they are what is the difference that this project is going to make in the community. So that's kind of impact assessment altogether. Project will then move into financial eligibility, which is the deeper dive for a project. In each of these stages, a project has an opportunity to provide evidence of local support of a project and just kind of tighten everything up. As we know, there has been, over the last several years, a lot of volatility in construction costs, and even in availability of construction workforce. And so we know and have been partners with projects as they're moving through this really critical stage. Project that makes it through all of that gets a commitment letter. We close on that financing, and then a project is, under construction. So just always love the numbers. In this ORCA process since 2024, we have processed 214 projects and closed financing on 13. And I always just kind of have to pause there because that means we got from application to construction in under 12 months. And for anyone who has worked in previous NOFA processes with OHCS, that is mind-blowingly faster than the way things have moved historically. Right now, we've got a bunch of those 214 projects living in different stages. We've got 15 that are already at the commitment stage, 16 in financial eligibility. We've got a stack of projects that are kind of on a wait list to go to Stability Council because we ran out of money and now the legislature has allocated more. So more of those projects will move forward. And then we've got another 80 projects that are in that impact assessment stage. So they are working through the steps of demonstrating the difference that this project will make in the community before they go either to the wait list or the council. And then in that intake stage, in that project concept stage, we currently have 66. So we've got continuously really good activity around these projects. We wanted to bring forward a couple of good examples of projects that are proceeding in Clatsop County. So Jason, if you go to the next slide. So kind of wanted to highlight over the last, and whenever we make a slide like this, we leave something important out. So if there's something that's in your community that we haven't caught, please correct us and inform your colleagues around the room there about that. But just kind of wanted to use this to demonstrate a real mix of the projects that are in Clatsop County and coming through the OHCS processes. So wanted to leave the Elk Meadows Manufactured Home Park on there just because this is an important body of work that many communities are thinking about. Elk Meadows is now a cooperatively owned manufactured home park. The CASA of Oregon provided the support for the for the residents of that park to form a co-op, which is a kind of unique and Oregon legal structure for manufactured home park residents. The value here and the investment that OHCS makes is the permanent affordability of those of that park and those homes for the residents there. So manufactured home park preservation is a really important tool that we've used. Recent closed projects, the Owens Adair Annex, and I know we have, emerging Owens Adair work going on, and then the Chelsea Gardens project. In the sort of current projects, as folks know, Marine Drive, which I think will have an evolving name, but that's the project for Clatsop Behavioral Health Care, partnered with Edlin and Company. That is, I believe, a permanent supportive housing project, rental project. Copeland Commons, another really exciting one, seeing finally the progress on the adaptive reuse, essentially, of that historic building in downtown Astoria. Innovative Housing is the developer there. Folks know their work from the Merwin Hotel. There are also other community partners. Certainly the Copeland Commons Board has been a driving force behind that project. Seaside Pacifica, very exciting for Seaside on the former high school site. Really excited to see that one moving forward. I believe that's closed and under construction. Similarly, Warrenton Community for All. And then the most recent intake that we have is for the reinvestment or preservation of the Elk Creek Terrace project. And that's owned and operated by Community Action Team. And that is preservation of those very, very much needed 36 units of multifamily residential in Cannon Beach. And then we put the Fort Point Land Bank loan. This is a program, the Land Acquisition Program. OHCS has resources available kind of on a rolling basis for acquisition of land for the eventual development as affordable housing. That can be either rental housing or home ownership projects. And those loans can be accessed by a developer or by a jurisdiction. And I would need to double check if that is just nonprofit developers, but I know jurisdictional partners can use that resource as well. I'll pause at the end of this one more slide just to kind of talk a little bit about resources. And then we'll pause for questions around the ORCA and rental housing. So Jason, if you want to pop forward to the next slide. Thanks. So sorry about the tiny print on this. This is really kind of a placeholder to say as of May of 2025, this represented the currently available development resources. This is always up on the OHCS website. The main news is that as of Friday, in fact, tomorrow will probably be, or I guess Friday morning, we'll publish the Housing Stability Council packet for the Housing Stability Council meeting in August. And all of the resources will be updated. This will be updated to reflect the legislative investment. And so I really just kind of wanted to display sort of the broad set of resources that are available through the ORCA. So, folks are often familiar with kind of the two main tax credit sources, which is really best for projects that are 50 units or more. Smaller projects are often what we call gap only. And that gap is the LIFT bond-based resource. We have set-asides for veterans housing specifically, for permanent supportive housing. There are, I think, a couple of projects in the county that have utilized or are utilizing those resources. There are other federal resources, which I think there's probably some shift there. I don't know that we're going to see the level of federal. That's the home funds. We're going to be doing an ongoing body of work in property stabilization investments. So this really represents the existing portfolio, and in some cases, projects that are severely at risk of being lost, either to physical or financial loss, or occasionally loss of project-based federal subsidies, which are really precious to keep those going. So we reserve funds and in fact will increase resources available with legislative investment to that sort of preservation and project stabilization work. And then the manufactured dwelling park preservation, we did not receive the level of investment that we had hoped for that program, but there will be some programmatic dollars available. Each year we do a round of competitive offering for 9% low-income housing tax credits. That is kind of operates as kind of a just a ranking of projects that are requesting that, because that is a feature of that federally guided program, is that there needs to be some element of competition. We just finished that 9 projects, I believe, from the most recent round. Will go forward. And then we make a lot of use of the pairing of private activity bonds and 4% low-income housing tax credits. And that is a really common, I think that's probably the structure, for example, for the Seaside Pacifica project, as well the Copeland Commons project, that kind of pairing of state bonds as well as the 4% tax credits. I touched briefly on the fact that there are programs both for land acquisition and then pre-development that kind of referred at the bottom. The land acquisition program is fully subscribed. That is a revolving loan fund. So if there's a property of interest, it's good to make contact on that because those, as those loans are paid off, those resources become available again. So kind of wanted to pause. We've got coming up next some slides about our home ownership projects, but wanted to pause here if there are any questions or follow-ups around rental housing and the ORCA process.
I had one question, Steve from Cannon Beach. On the last slide, you had something on Elk Creek Village and it's in the intake process. Can you share a little bit of what is taking place there or what's that a little bit about as much as
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And as I described, Elk Creek Terrace is that existing 36 unit project there in Cannon Beach. The developer or the owner operator community action team has requested funding for preservation of that property. I believe they have done the work recently to partner with a consultant who's going to help them move that forward. They are in the initial stages. I think it's kind of that impact assessment stage of getting an application in for that project. And I think the way I understand they are approaching that is kind of a full, rather than, a kind of a Band-Aid approach to the project, that they really have recognized there needs to be a pretty full understanding of the capital needs of that project and reinvestment there.
So how does your program from a funding perspective work? You said, 12 months from the period of time of intake to construction. I guess how does that work from a local perspective with regards to the land use process? How are they getting through that? From a funding perspective on your end to know that something is actually approved to move forward?
So it would be I think I would differentiate between an existing project like we just described for Elk Creek Terrace, which is basically, an established project that really needs some improvements.
Yeah.
Physical improvement to the property. Differentiate that from a new construction project where in that impact assessment stage, the developer is required to describe to the agency the status of any land use approvals needed. And and they include that in their schedule, etc. So the developer is, I know in previous versions, there was a kind of a sign off by the city with regard to the land use status of a project, but the developer in this case needs to demonstrate what any required land use approvals beyond sort of standard permitting, etc.
Thank you.
Yep. We've got a little time at the end to answer any questions if more of those come up, but we can kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about home ownership programs. Our colleagues in the home ownership group were kind enough to give us some good information here. And we're focusing on the capital end of the home ownership investments that OHCS makes. As folks know, OHCS also makes available to organizations that support affordable homeownership, especially those first-time homebuyer programs. There are down payment assistance and other kinds of programs that go there. What we're focusing on here is essentially capital for the development of new affordable homeownership. So the source of this is the low-income local innovation and fast track loan, which is a bond-based, it's Article Q2 bonds issued by the state, which creates some a few hoops to go through, but through good work of the homeownership advocates, we're able to use LIFT for homeownership. So the example here is a cost of construction for a new home at 540. And this is, we've seen, I think homeownership is great about staying very current on what is achievable in communities around the state. So they kind of use this as a potentially achievable finance stack. What we know and what they know is that an affordable sales price for that would be significantly lower than the cost of construction. And so the calculation that we work with is to achieve an affordable sales price of under $300,000 for that home, where the owner, the potential owner, would be securing their mortgage, which would then repay that construction loan. And the gap investment comes in to fill the funding gap. So pretty straightforward approach, what we often see. So I just want to be sure. Some of the important parts here is that it must be net new housing. This does not work for rehab of existing housing. It needs to serve folks whose income is 80% of median or below. And that is statutorily authorized or statutorily required by the funding mechanism that the legislature approved. And these resources are released through a NOFA process by the homeownership team that is separate from the ORCA, and will provide contact for getting information on that group. Jason, if you want to move a slide forward. Great. So just wanted to kind of show some numbers. Our teams have highlighted that we have opportunity in Clatsop County to use OHCS homeownership resources, and would love to partner to do that. Final slide here for home ownership, if you would, Jason. So we want you to know that there will be a 2026 NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability. Anticipate $100 million for the 2026-27 biennium, likely to launch in January. And that is first come, first serve, with support by that team for new partners. Strong recommendation there is, if there are projects that are kind of in the like, wow, we could be ready by January of 2026, be in contact with the homeownership development team. They'll be able to connect with, those notices as those come out and so on. There is on the homeownership website a survey currently available. I think that's anticipating what are some of the homeownership priorities. Where the team is doing some focus groups, and we can, sort of follow up if there is interest in assuring that folks in Clatsop County are part of that consultation. And then the rollout of the 2026 NOFA will be announced in September. And again, contacts for the homeownership crew, and as we said, we'll be sure everyone has access to the presentation so you can follow up on these. Anything coming up for folks around homeownership resources through OHCS?
Hey, can I jump in with a question?
Sure.
It's listed as a loan, but I understand those are forgivable loans if some conditions are met. Is that still true? And do you remember what those conditions are?
Yeah, there is. So it is a second position loan. It's junior to the mortgage, which is generally required. It's a obligation that stays with the property. So there is incentive to in a sale transaction, and this is especially true for projects that are used in a land trust, there is some retained expectation that of the affordability of that program. Terms of the loan, I'm not, I would not be surprised if it's a 20-year, but that is me having worked with that program several years ago. So I would definitely follow up with the team for the specifics on that.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Again, we can sure follow up with any other questions. But Jason, you want to take it away on the Merle?
Yes. So along with my primary responsibility of being a technical advisor for the Affordable Rental Housing Division, I am also assigned to be the lead on the Moderate Income Revolving Loan Program. And so I'm excited to be presenting to this group. I would really like the opportunity to make connections with our jurisdictional partners because primarily this program and the role that I will have in it is building relationships with sponsoring jurisdictions. So I'll just share a couple stats related to the MERL program. It was passed through 2024 legislation, specifically SB 1537, which established a no interest revolving loan fund for cities and counties to increase housing production for moderate income Oregonians at or below 120% AMI. Like I kind of called out, cities and counties, which we refer to as sponsoring jurisdictions, administer the local grant program, and OHCS serves as the loan issuer and provides some technical assistance for program implementation. There was, through legislation, $75 million allocated to the program, 50 million of which are available in the first biennium, and there is a 20% set aside for rural projects. And then the purpose of the MERL program, it's designed to serve as a gap resource for eligible projects, ensuring that affordable housing developments can move forward with development when other funding sources fall short. I'm very interested in this program, and I could probably talk at length about it, but I will just share this slide here. We've been rolling out several resources that are now available even in the last few weeks. So maybe if you kind of became familiar with the program a few months ago, and we have been working towards making more resources available. So there's several links here. Again, this presentation will be shared. You can kind of click through those. I would like to call out the last link, what is called the question and comments portal. That's an area where anybody can submit questions, comments that directly go to the MERL technical advisor, which is myself, but also the MERL program team. And we have a process in place to efficiently and effectively get you an answer to your questions. But what is also recently available through that form is one-on-one technical assistance, specifically aimed at our sponsoring jurisdictional partners. So if there was a desire for any city or county staff to request one-on-one technical assistance, you can go on and make that request through that online form, and we will follow up and set a meeting. And we can go over any questions that you might have about the program, how it might any opportunities or challenges for your specific community. So if there is a desire for any of the folks in the room to pursue a one-on-one meeting with OHCS staff, I would encourage you to follow that form. But also, you can reach out to me directly through email. Happy to make the connection and just kind of continue the conversation around MERL. And so with that, that's really our presentation for the day. Several kind of generally helpful links on this slide here. I would like to call out, and Kate mentioned it a little bit earlier in the presentation, that we will be attending the Northwest Oregon Housing Summit in Astoria in September. So I would be more than happy to meet and chat and make a connection with anybody who might also be attending the summit. As time allows, Kate and I are happy to continue to answer any more questions.
I see Sarah Lou is on this call and she's organizing the housing summit. And we this may be the place, not be the place to surprise you, but in addition to your attendance, you will most likely be invited to be part of a panel presentation. So, surprise.
Yeah,
Happy to support.
yeah, that's actually great. And I think on behalf of, Summit, we hoped that this kind of piqued some interest in like maybe at that summit, we'd like to know more about this or that, other of the OHCS, beyond Orca or Merle, if it would be helpful to, get our home ownership colleagues involved in that. Really happy to do that. Very interested.
Sarah Lou, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Well, I'm so excited to hear it. Thank you. We are preparing an agenda of a number of topics, and I think this one will fit right in with some of the funding mechanisms that we're talking about. So looking forward to collaborating with you more on it, all of you. And I'm actually looking for the link to register for that day. It is an all-day event in Astoria, free to those that want to attend, but we do have limited seating and are providing lunch, so we're asking folks to register. So I'm going to dig up that link and hope those of you on the call that are interested in connecting with developers, learning about funding programs, and networking with other agencies and like-minded people will consider joining us.
This is John. A quick question going back to the moderate income revolving loan fund. My understanding is it's not to exceed 120% AMI, or can it exceed 120% AMI a little bit?
And not exceed, capped at 120% AMI.
Jason, have you encountered the question about, for instance, a project that had both 120% or lower homes involved as well as over? I think sort of a mixed use, so to speak. If I'm, kind of thinking about a rental housing development, we sometimes see those where some portion of the project or the units would be income restricted, and then others would be available at market. Just kind of thinking through the, how do you split those hairs in a couple of different ways?
Yes, thank you for calling that out, Kate. That scenario is possible. I have not had a specific conversation where it was being proposed, but yes, mixed income projects can utilize the MERL. So a portion of the units could utilize the 120%, while another portion of units offered at a different affordability or market rate.
And what resource do you use to determine the AMI, the countywide AMI, city-specific AMI, or region? Just curious.
Yes, I believe it's the HUD AMI, and it is available on the MERL webpage, those income table, AMI table.
And the HUD table is countywide. It's not it's not at a city level. It's by county, correct?
That's actually a really good question that I have chatted about, but yes, currently it is at the county level.
Hey, Alyssa and Jason, this is Brett from the DLCD. Question on that, just to maybe provide more information for the group. in my dealings with the AMI table in the past, isn't this like a snapshot in time that is like a look back by a year or two? Uh, that I, if I remember in working on a project in Astoria, there was some consternation that uh, that AMIs should be were different than what the table was showing. And if I remember correctly, HUD updates that, and it's looking back a year or two. I see Kate maybe nodding her head. Can maybe someone share some information on that? Because that was very enlightening, I think, to the folks in Astoria at the time.
Yeah, thanks for that call out, Brett. I think there's, a couple of times when the AMIs adjust. As you said, HUD publishes those annually. When a project is in the development stage, right up until the, closing, if, the development period is over a span of, 6 months, and within that span of time, HUD updates those, the most current incomes can be used. Once the project is established, on the asset management side, the ongoing operations, our partners in asset management do track to the most current published. So there is opportunity as those shift.
And I will call out that relatively recently, the Merle webpage on the OHCS website has been updated with the 2025 numbers.
I think it's also important to point out a feature of Merle is that there is not a heavy load of ongoing compliance, so to speak, with regard to those income levels. It operates differently than other OHCS programs, if I'm recalling that correctly, Jason. It's kind of literally a snapshot in time on that one.
Yes, like at the time of application.
Right.
Any more questions for our panelists, Kate and Jason? Fantastic presentation. Appreciate it.
Really good to be here with you, and very much look forward to being in person in the fall.
Yes, thank you.
All right, I guess they're probably not gonna stick around.
Happy to stick around. We've been generally attending these meetings, so we'll just be quiet and listen now. Unless you want to invite us to leave.
Well, the next topic, Alyssa's gonna lead, so it's gonna be scintillating, the Housing Planning Assistant Grant Program update. And I'm sure Brett might weigh in too a little bit.
Yeah, this is just a quick update. We have been talking here at this group about following up on our last housing planning assistance work that just finished, the land inventory project, with a follow-on phase that looks at essentially opportunity sites and opportunity areas for housing development. Basically looking at the land inventory work and pulling out what had come out from each of the cities, which is, hey, there's only really a couple places in our city that we think we're going to focus on housing. And some of them are site specific, some of them are area specific, some of them are, short-term opportunities, some of them are longer-term opportunities. And so we sort of agreed that that would be the next scope of work that we would pursue. So Garrett and I have been working on fleshing out a scope of work that will respond to the DLCD application. I'm going to meet with Brett after this meeting to get his feedback on it. One thing I will note is, just like last time, we will need letters of support from each of the jurisdictions. I know I keep asking for that lately, but that's just because we're trying to get money and pursuing grants. So I'll work with your staff to get a very basic dear DLCD, we would like to continue planning for housing. Please help us letter for you all to sign. The application is due the first week in August, so we'll be pulling it together pretty quickly here. And that is my update, unless Brett or Garrett wants to add anything about the region-wide application. John, I also want to invite you if you want to give an update on what City of Astoria is doing, just so folks know.
John, do you want to talk about Astoria? Because I think that was actually kind of one kind of even internal question that came up when Alyssa asked to meet with me. She kind of wrote up a little bit of a synopsis, and I was kind of able to shop it with some other folks. And one of the internal questions was, "Hey, is Astoria submitting something separately?" And I know the answer is yes, because I think it's been submitted. But
We have submitted
I thought
something.
maybe you want to update. So.
No, it's pretty linear, straightforward. Astoria goes over 10,000 residents, so it really kicked in the need for that housing capacity analysis, which fits in nicely to the work of the buildable lands inventory infrastructure studies that just completed. So yeah, we submitted that on Monday and look forward to getting that going. So, and pretty confident we'll probably get awarded something. So yeah. Oh, we chose the DLCD chooses the consultant.
Oh, one of their
They
contract
4 or 5.
consultants, yeah.
So.
Right on.
Any questions or feedback about the application or the process, or anything you want me to make sure I check in with Brett about before we proceed?
So with that said, then just the remainder of the other communities would be working on the project you're talking about then.
Right. I think, right, other than Astoria, who does have their statutory requirements and a path they need to follow, right, the rest of us are essentially volunteering to continue to collaborate on this sort of regional housing planning that we're doing at this table. So really the first piece of work in the new project would be each city works with whichever consultant we get to review the inventory and identify which are the sites or areas that you would want to focus on. So in Cannon Beach, what are the sites that have come up as the most obvious potential scenarios for housing development? In Seaside, I know you guys have talked about maybe an area-wide approach. Let's identify those. And so that would actually be the first thing we would do, is pick the sites rather than trying to pick them before we submit the grant application.
Alyssa, this is Brett again. And again, you and I are talking about this in more detail after this meeting, but as I was understanding the concept, this grant would still apply and have all incorporated cities in Clatsop County part of this. So Astoria would still be doing that aspect, the site analysis still as a part of this shared grant, and then separate would be the statutorily required housing capacity analysis on their application, correct?
Right. I mean, I think if you just look at the sort of planning and development continuum, right, we've been at this very broad planning thing. Astoria still has some other planning policy, larger HCA, HPS questions. Ours would really be focusing in on some of the more specifically identified housing development opportunities. So hopefully ours would complement the city's work so that when they get from the HCA to the HPS, they can already start including things that might have been identified through the other work.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to get at is that, yeah, Astoria would under this concept would still be at the table. Along
Right.
with the Clatsop County grant application is what I was trying to maybe highlight.
Right.
Yeah.
Our goal is add capacity to Astoria, not distract capacity from Astoria. Anyway, that's the update, and Brett and I will keep you posted on our further conversations. And any of you who want to reach out, let's touch base in the next week.
Yeah, Brett, I know it's on the webpage, but the grants will be awarded by September, is that correct, or?
Yeah, so it's, we just had our first internal coordination meeting, on that this week, and so, it's looking like September is kind of the goal to be able to do that and get them rolling out, after that. It's kind of if you're, working with a DLCD-led consultant, there's the pairing, the housing staff will be looking at all the different approved grants and pairing those up with the different consulting teams. So so generally what happens is the jurisdiction's notified and then comes the contracting, which rolls through the fall. And hopefully by the end of the, before the end of the year, things are in place to get going.
All right. Are you done, Alyssa? Any more?
I'm done. Happy to move on to the next agenda item.
Which is lease to locals. Take it away.
So, two pieces of updates. One, I presented at the Board of County Commissioners, just as all of you have seen the presentation at your local city councils. And there was an article written by the Daily Historian as a result of the presentation to the Board of County Commissioners. And so with that, our friends at Oregon Public Broadcasting picked up the news from the Daily Historian. And today I was on OPB Think Out Loud, talking about the program, which was cool, except for the part where we don't have the money yet. And so here I am doing a lovely little press tour, but still keeping my fingers crossed for the grant. And with that, I don't have great feelers reporting back on the grant. I don't know if you guys have seen the significant cuts that Care Oregon has had to make recently, like in the last week or so. They've laid off 80 people. It's been in the news. Medicaid is taking a big hit. And so while I have not heard from the CCO directly whether they're moving forward with the grant program or not, I do think the environmental factors may have shifted, and we may need to think about some alternative fundraising strategies to move forward with the program. So we'll have to talk more about that as we know more about that. That having been said, I did meet with Placemate, and we've started fleshing out the program guidelines that would be more specific for the Clatsop County program. And we talked also about what happens if the money is delayed, what happens if we need to do some alternative funding approaches, and we talked about, sort of what if we don't do it in August and September? What's the timing that might work? And so we kind of have built in this potential early 2026 launch should the fall launch be delayed because of the funding. So any of you guys who want to talk about alternative ways to find the resources to get this program up and running, I would be welcome to have that conversation. But I'm continuing to look and continuing to move forward to try to get to a fall program launch. So that is my update on that. But definitely listen to OPB today, because I feel like regardless of what happens with the program, it was some opportunity to talk about the issues that we're facing in Clatsop County and how we're working to address them. So I will always take the good attention on our work whenever we can get it. That's my update on lease to locals, unless there's any questions.
I don't see any. I do know there's bingo down the hall. We can start gambling, trying to raise some money.
I mean, it might come to that, you guys. We'll do what we got to do.
Yeah, moving on. Winding down here, legislative session highlights.
Well, so this is a conversation that some of you guys have asked for, and some of you guys probably know more than I do. And so I'm just gonna quickly go over some of the big takeaways around housing. We also have our friends from OHCS and DLCD in the room if there's other things that you might want to add around some of the outcomes from the legislative session related to housing. There's kind of there's kind of three categories of things that I feel like happened in the session. There was kind of the body of work around landlord-tenant work. There was the body of work around homelessness and all of that system. And then there was the housing production and funding conversation. And so I followed very closely the conversation about the homelessness work. It was House Bill 3644, which basically took what had been the emergency order from the governor in the last biennium to establish shelters and establish funding for emergency shelters and rapid rehousing, and establish basically a homeless system statewide that OHCS could administer rather than doing it under this emergency order. And it came with a price tag. And I have been going to some of the OHCS debriefs about sort of the next steps, both statewide and at the county level. Um, you may have read in the various news articles that everything that was asked for was not funded. And so things like rapid rehousing and eviction prevention took significant cuts from what they have been doing. So, for example, we've had a pretty robust rapid rehousing program in Clatsop County that Clatsop Community Action is administering. The statewide reduction was a 74% reduction in the funding statewide for rapid rehousing. So we're going to see a lot less of that program, similar with the eviction prevention. The good news is there was only a 6% statewide reduction in the shelter funding. And so it looks that, and Clatsop County's percentage of the statewide need was increased. So in the last biennium, we got 0.7% of the state's homeless shelter funding. And in this next biennium, we're going to get 2.2%. So there is a recognition that our need has been acknowledged more than it was before. That having been said, it's probably going to result in us essentially getting about the same amount of money that we got in the last biennium, not more, not less, about the same, but we'll probably have to do more with it. We'll have to, the basic condition of the funding is no net loss of the existing shelter beds. But with the reductions in the other programs and all of the rest, we're going to have to sort of reconfigure the MAC group to look at our next 2 years of how we're going to implement the shelter funding. And of course, this is not a call where I will say anything bad about OHCS in public, but we don't know how long the contracting is going to take. Although there is, clearly a sense of urgency on the part of the staff there to make sure there's as much continuity between shelter operations as possible so that places like lifeboat services don't have to wait 6 months to get additional funding and be at risk of shutting down. So that's one we've been watching very closely on the homeless service side. And again, I don't know if there's anyone else in the room who wants to add more on that one, or ask any questions. Otherwise, I can quickly talk about some of the housing production stuff. All right. And just so you know, like I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm like everything I know, I'm like reading from articles or getting from like state agency websites that are much more detailed than I am. And so if you want more additional information about this, like OHCS has a good presentation on their website, DLCD has a good presentation on their website. And so Kate, are you gonna add?
Yeah, I just sent to you and Garrett the kind of high level overview from the OHCS website.
Yeah.
So would really only, I I could add some programmatic, like some good things that we feel are coming out of the legislature, but don't want to, you're on a roll. So
Well, I'm just keeping it high level, but if anybody wants to dive in more deeply, happy to go more deeply as appropriate. Um, I don't know how much you guys were all following the condo defect liability reform. There was a little bit of good news around that hopefully will make condos an easier thing to build. There was some more missing middle housing development legislation that was passed. I am sure most of you followed Senate Bill 974, which was the requiring local governments to confirm applications in 30 days and approve or deny development permits within 120 days. I imagine that will have impacts on all of us. There's also the pre-approved housing plans now, which is super helpful. That was House Bill 2258. And then they actually did put some money into housing infrastructure finance, which is something that we have all wanted, but it's like $10 million. So that's going to be, not even one project. But it created the Housing Infrastructure Finance Authority body. So in theory, it can be funded again in the future. There's a few more other loose end housing things. I don't know, again, if others have questions or want to go any deeper into any of that, but to me, those are the ones that I think we're the most interested in. Um, and obviously, there was a lot of other legislative stuff that affected Clatsop County that isn't housing related, but I am not the expert in the room on the tourism lodging tax or any of the other things, but I know there's at least a couple people in the room who are even more knowledgeable who could speak to it if you wanted to. Other than that, that's my update. I'm happy to answer questions or follow up as appropriate. So funny being in this meeting on Zoom because I can only see like where the owl goes. So like for a minute I see Mayor Knopp, hi, and then for a minute I see Tiffany, and then it like swings over and I get a little glimpse of Chet. It's weird. It's so weird to be in the Zoom side of this thing. But hello everyone.
Hey, Alyssa, this is Chad. I'll swing the camera over here. No word on did that TLT change, like include extra housing, or is that still a couple of years out? That was a rumor I heard a while ago. They were trying to expand TLT so you could spend it on housing, but I'm guessing that wasn't the change that just went through.
Do you want to know?
Mayor Wright is the expert on this topic.
It was kind of a last minute thing, but a change to the lodging tax to allow us to switch from 70/30, which, for instance, Seaside, that's what we're at. 70% has to go to lodging, not lodging, tourism facilities, for instance, convention center, and tourism promotion, for instance, our visitor center. And it's pretty strict, and sometimes maybe close your ears, state people. We're a little flexible on some of that. But our flexibility really would be if we could spend significantly amount more money like on roads, because the tourists use all of our roads too. It got passed, changing it to 60/40, 60% going to cities, 40% going to promotion. Got through the House and passed, about 2/3 positive to negative. Then it went to the Senate, and it was at the state Senate Revenue Committee. Unfortunately, the head of that Revenue Committee was Senator Meek. And if you remember the brouhaha that happened about 10 days before the session closed, he came out saying he was not in favor of the bill for transportation. Significant increase in taxes, significantly more money to cities for roads. So we were kind of in favor of that part of it. So what he ended up doing after he got kicked off, I didn't really see why he said this, but or why he would do this, but he basically did not pass anything out of the Revenue Committee. And so it died. LLC, AOC, all of us are going to try to come back during the special session in January, February next year. We're pretty sure we have, if we can get it out of committee, which is really the toughest part, if it gets to the floor, it'll pass. I have had a nice hour-long chat with Jason Brandt, who's the head of ORLA, Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association. They're still deathly afraid we're never going to spend $1 on tourism again. For Seaside, my quote was, "That's absurd to think we would not spend as much as we need to on tourism money." Seaside is also unique in that we have $11 million that we can't spend in a reasonable fashion. We could throw lots of money towards promotion, but it's not going to do any good. We do as much as we can. So anyway, that's where it stands. And the other thing is today at 6 o'clock, the county is going to, towards the end of their agenda, but they will more than likely pass a 2% increase to lodging tax in order to get their 30%, which amounts to about $1.2 million, to spend on the jail and public safety. They will be left with about $2.8 million. They're just going to set aside somewhere until they figure out what to do with it, because the county really does not promote tourism. They don't have any hotels on on county land that's not in the city. And, they currently have a 1% tax. They're gonna bump it to 3%, an extra 2%.
And that'll affect all the jurisdictions within the county.
It'll affect everybody in the county, yeah. You know, obviously mainly the city. So, we'll see. We're actually gonna talk about it tomorrow at our Downtown Business Association. But I'm pretty sure they'll pass it. They don't have any choice. They didn't want to, they actually postponed it when they saw that we were making significant progress in the legislature. Monica, the assistant county manager, made that very clear yesterday at a Cedar board meeting business. You know, they don't want to do this, but it's the only means they have to make up enough revenue to help the tourists that come and take part in the county jail and sheriff system. Yeah, it's some, I forget the exact number, it's something like 45%, depending on the time of year. That's the resident population up there, so.
Just like they use our water system, our sewer system, our street system.
Yeah.
Our law enforcement, public safety.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll see. It's kind of all back up in the air again, but you know, having to do this, the county having to do this is a perfect example of why this 22-year-old law has, you know, it hasn't been changed in those 22 years. We were fortunate in that the state wanted to change their rate from 1.5 to 2.5 or 3%. And they're gonna use that excess for all kinds of things, Fish and Wildlife Department and many things that weren't exactly related to tourism. But that's a state tax that's on top of what they already charge. That failed. They didn't get enough traction. So there you go.
And so that 60%, if it were to pass, could be roads, could be maybe some housing, could be anything the city wants to do.
It can go to general fund.
Great.
Right now, for instance, Seaside, our 30% goes 100% to public safety. And that's only, it pays for less than 25% of our bill for police, fire, lifeguards, etc.
Okay.
One just additional thing, I'll toss it in here because Alyssa did mention homeless. On the 31st at 5:30 at the convention center, there will be a homeless laws, mainly HB 3115 from a few years ago. Update by the League of Oregon Cities executive director at the convention center. It's open to everybody. So if you want to come and get kind of the most recent thoughts, Patty Mullihill, she's really good, does a great job. Convention Center, 5:30 on the 31st.
So, John, just kind of adding on to kind of what Alyssa was talking about. Coming out of this long legislative session, well, it's after any legislative session, DLCD is statutorily required to provide a synopsis of all land use related legislation. So we're not going to be touching transient lodging tax. But all the land use related items, and we provide a report to that. And I'm getting a lot of questions about 2138, which was passed in the application of the housing amendments that are coming out of that. There's going to be rulemaking that's going to be moving forward, so more to come. But what I'll say is that I'm understanding that our legislative team, remember Aurora, who participated at our earlier meetings, she and the other staff are working on that report, and it will be issued most likely by the middle of August. So if any of the jurisdictions have questions about 2138, I am still learning about the intricacies of that. The legislative team does a good job trying to dissect what does the legislative directives mean in terms of moving forward in next steps. So more to come is all I just wanted to say.
Okay, speaking of next steps, what are our next steps? August meeting or not to August meeting?
I think we probably will have to have that conversation among ourselves. It probably depends on where we are with lease to locals, whether we need an August meeting. Garrett, I think we had planned not to have a meeting, but did you want to go ahead and jump in? You're on mute. Garrett, you are on mute.
Yeah, that's right. And typically we have a September and October meeting before breaking for the holidays.
If anybody feels strongly one way or the other, please let Garrett or me know. But we don't, and if there are other agenda items that anybody is interested in seeing or would like to suggest, also please feel free to reach out to Garrett or me or your city staff. That's all I have, John.
Any closing remarks? Good to the order comments?
Good work.
Ways to defund tourism in Seaside?
And Kennedy.
I think we're good on our end, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for your help. And good to see everybody for the brief moments I saw you.
Bye-bye.
You, I know you